The story is told of a man who was the president of a big company. He had a Mercedes, a beautiful home, a lovely family. But he was not happy. Something was missing from his life, but he didn't know what it was. Then one night during a business trip, something happened that changed him. He had a religious experience that changed him forever. Speaking of that experience, he said, "I saw what was missing from my life. It was Jesus Christ. I had not turned my life over to him." And that night, he did just that. He changed his appetite and desires, and his life changed in a way that brought him a happiness he never dreamed existed. Were you ever hungry or thirsty for something and didn't know what it was? Again, did you ever go to the refrigerator, open the door, look at everything on the shelves and say, "I am thirsty for something, but not for any of that"? There are two kinds of hunger: physical hunger, which only food can satisfy, and spiritual hunger, which no food in the world can satisfy. We can be rich and successful and still feel an incredible hunger within us. And the gospel passage of today, which is a continuation of the miracle of the loaves we began last week, the people went in search of Jesus to give them more food. But they had misinterpreted the miracle. They had misread the meaning of the sign. It is very easy to misread or misinterpret a situation. John wants to make sure that the readers of his gospel do not misinterpret this sign. And so he leads us progressively deeper into the meaning of the miracle. And that is why we have the reading from John chapter 6, spanning 6 Sundays in the liturgical year. Today, the theme of the new Exodus, which was subtly introduced last week, is developed. Remember that John has already told us that the festival of Passover was near. Passover is the annual celebration of the Exodus. It was one of the 3 great pilgrimage feasts, the other 2 being Pentecost and Tabernacles. They were called pilgrimage feasts because the Torah laid down in the books of Exodus and Deuteronomy that all men had to make a pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem for those 3 feasts. Interestingly, our first reading today is from chapter 16 of the book of Exodus. There we hear the story about the people of Israel complaining against Moses. "You have brought us to this wilderness to starve this whole company to death." God heard their cries and responded with a miraculous gift. In the words of today's responsorial psalm, he rained down manna from their food and gave them bread from heaven. The bread from heaven satisfied their physical hunger and taught them to trust in God's providence. In today's gospel, Jesus makes the people understand that the miracle of the loaves was a sign pointing to the satisfying of a deeper hunger. He was pointing them to the true bread from heaven, the one standing before them. He tells them, "Do not work for food that cannot last, but work for food that endures to eternal life." And the people asked, "What must we do? And what sign will you give to show us that we should believe in you?" Is this not incredible? The very people who were miraculously fed from 5 loaves and 2 fish are now asking for a sign. They seem to be suffering from collective amnesia. They press the point further by alluding to the story of the manna. Jesus then tells the people that it wasn't Moses who gave them bread from heaven. It is my Father who gives you the bread from heaven, the true bread. "Sir," they said, "give us that bread always." Jesus replies, "I am the bread of life." Jesus himself is the very embodiment of divine wisdom, the one who satisfies the deepest hunger and thirst of the human spirit. And so on this Sunday, it is important to ask ourselves, what do we hunger and thirst for? Do we hunger and thirst for riches, comfort, security, validation, or pleasures? Or are we hungry for something more? Jesus invites us to crave the bread that endures, the bread of eternal life. St. Augustine in his Confession says, "You have made us, God, for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." God is the very ground of our being. If we attempt to sever ourselves from God, we will remain forever restless and unsatisfied. We will spiritually wither and die. As much as we need food to eat or air to breathe, we need our faith for living. Although the manna came from heaven, it was earthly food. The people ate it, but they were soon hungry again. Human beings hunger for more. The feeding of the multitude is a sign pointing to Jesus, who alone can satisfy our deepest hunger and thirst. And so as we go about our activities this week, let us remember that as Christians, we must change our appetites, our old ways of living and illusory desires, like Paul emphasizes in our second reading, and crave for things that edify and makes us advance in virtues. Our cravings should be for Jesus, His body and blood in the Eucharist. He is the bread of life, the only one who can truly satisfy our spiritual hunger. And so I ask again, what is it that you hunger and thirst for?